In this moment, following a time of great upheaval for the U.S. education system, our children need our unshakable support and belief in their potential more than ever. We at Presence are innovators in special education-related and mental health service delivery. We're coming together with visionary leaders to share ideas on transforming the paradigm and how we can address the challenges facing our children. Dr. James Lane went from a traveling musician to landing a job in the Biden-Harris administration. He served as Assistant Secretary in the U.S. Department of Education and held senior advisor roles under U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona. Prior to this, he served as Virginia's 25th Superintendent of Public Instruction and was a district superintendent to 3 divisions in Virginia. Dr. Lane, how did you go from being a musician to working for the U.S. Department of Education?
I went to school, studied to become a professional trumpet player, and absolutely loved playing music and got amazing experiences to go on the road. And after a few years of playing music, ultimately knew that I really wanted to get into teaching and wanted to share my passion for music with students. So I became a band director in Durham, North Carolina. I didn't teach the traditional band music. We played Earth, Wind, and Fire, and we played hip hop songs, and we did all this cool stuff, and eventually grew that band program into a championship band program. And by the time I left teaching just a few years later, over 50% of the school was in the band program at the time that I left. It was at that moment that I knew I wanted to become a principal, because I started thinking, what if every classroom in my school could be as impactful as I thought that my classroom was? So a few years later, I was lucky enough to become a principal in Middlesex County. Actually had a school that struggled with some test scores. 6th grade math was like 50-something% pass rates. We put in place what I've often called my 7 steps to improving test scores. And a year later, we had over 90% pass rates in that school. What if every school in my community could be as impactful as I thought my school was? That's when I knew I wanted to become a superintendent. And then eventually ended up at one of the largest school districts in the nation, Chesterfield, Virginia. And so after a few years, the governor called and said, look, it's time to be state superintendent. 1.3 million students in Virginia, $8 billion budget. And we really tried to maximize every dollar we had and every regulation that we created, whatever it was, to make a difference for kids. I was honored to have the opportunity to get called by folks at the White House that do personnel recruitment and asked if I would serve in the U.S. Department of Education with Secretary Cardona. And the opportunity to lead the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education is honestly one of the greatest honors of my life. 50 million plus students in America, no more greater opportunity to have impact. I led all of the title programs, assessment and accountability, the American Rescue Plan's ESSER funds, and we did so many amazing things to help the country recover from the pandemic, but also just to improve education in general. To go from a musician and from a small town in Kentucky to having meetings at the White House and the Rose Garden, I'll just forever be thankful for that opportunity. And I left there a few months ago, and now I lead PDK International, where I have the opportunity to work with future teachers and to make sure we end this teacher shortage.
What elements did you bring from your life as a musician to your role as an educator?
Every job that I've approached as a leader, I think I still think of myself as a conductor. When you're running your organization, the trumpet section can be perfect, but maybe the clarinets need a little bit of work. And so we'll stop and make sure the clarinet part is perfect. Then we'll put the whole piece back together. And I think about leadership that way a lot, where, my job is to make sure every facet of the organization is maximizing its potential. And sometimes there are things we want to work on over here to get better. And then there's other things over here going really well. But when we put that whole orchestra back together, we make magic and beautiful music together and make a difference in people's lives. And that passion for music drives me in the way that I think about leadership and inspiring people and making sure that we're doing the best that we can in every sector of our work, just like the sections of our orchestra.
What do you really think are the most critical elements for school leaders to be addressing regarding student learning loss?
Ultimately, one of the biggest things in front of school leaders is they had a huge opportunity with the over $130 billion that was invested through the American Rescue Plan's ESSER funds, elementary and secondary relief dollars. Those funds must be obligated by September of this year. The big thing, I think, is the first thing districts should do is look at what they're doing, find what's most effective, what's making the most difference, and be thinking right now as they're doing budgets for next year around how they're going to sustain those efforts after September. Now, the second big thing that I think is extremely important is to not take our eye off of the academic recovery needs of students. We've got to innovate the mental health pipeline and think about ways that telehealth and other innovative opportunities are going to be able to help us move forward. I mean, let's take the time to make sure that we have high quality instructional materials, that our teachers are trained on the latest techniques, that they know about all this amazing technology that can be used to support students from mental health needs all the way to advances in AI and everything else that's really going to change the landscape of teaching. But it's always going to be about that human teacher and that student.
What levers have you seen work to address educator recruitment and retention?
We've got to all get super clear that there is a teacher shortage. I can tell you, if you talk to any education leader, they're struggling to find the right person that's perfect for every job. First and foremost, we have to pay our teachers more. I don't know a single teacher that doesn't have a side gig, but you shouldn't have to have a side gig to make a living as an educator. Teacher salaries have not grown for so long that we're really going to have to make huge investments there to make a difference. And that can be expensive, but it's going to take a lot of federal, state, and local leaders coming together to think about how to solve that issue. So the second thing we need to do is we got to focus on teacher working conditions. We've really, really got to make sure that we're protecting teachers' time so they have time to plan, that they have time to look at their students' data and make adjustments and plans for each individual student. Teachers want to be treated like professionals. They want to be trusted. Last piece I'll just say is you do have to build a teacher pipeline, and I believe you have to build that from your home community. A stat that not a lot of people know is that 60% of teachers end up teaching within 20 miles of where they went to high school. So if you're a district leader and you're not recruiting in your home community, you're never going to eliminate the shortage in your community. There are a lot of facets to this, but policy around salary, making sure our principals are supporting our teachers through their schedule, and building a robust pipeline that comes from the home community, those are the three big levers to making a difference.
What are a couple of organizations that are doing great work to attract new educators?
At PDK International, where I'm CEO, we run a program called Educators Rising. Educators Rising is primarily a career and technical education program that we have in over 1,000 high schools in America, over 25,000 students in that pipeline. We pair that with a career and technical student organization, which is essentially an after-school club to further their skills and to work with kids in the community and learn deeply about education. The newest model coming out is around registered apprenticeships. And this is an idea that's more about putting students right into the workforce versus right into college as they move into education. The idea is that if they, for instance, graduate educators rising credentialed, that they can go right into a paraprofessional position, get paid right out of high school, and use Department of Labor apprenticeship money to earn their college degree and get paid for their apprenticeship. And then when they become fully certified, they become a part of the education community as a teacher. There are a number of organizations working on this. One of the most popular is called the National Center for Grow Your Own. But I've been impressed by their work, and now they've announced in something like 75% of states that they've launched apprenticeships. And so I think that partnership of the pre-apprenticeship model in high school, the apprenticeship model, and then of course our colleges and universities, if all three of those sectors can come together, that's really where we can build out this pipeline.
We at Presence, we are a company that provides teletherapy services. So we are innovating how schools are able to not only assess, but also address the special education related and mental health needs of students in their schools and their districts. Our solution exists to help extend the on-the-ground staff. We have access to over 2,000 trained clinicians, that is speech-language pathologists, occupational therapists, school psychologists, and other mental health professionals. How can leaders ensure students with IEPs receive the services they need?
Thank you for bringing up what you do at Presence. I mean, that wasn't readily available to me when I was a district superintendent. And I really see it as a game changer. At the heart of a lot of our education issues that we need to resolve is funding, right? And if you look at with the passage of IDEA in the 1980s and the suggested funding levels that were going to be necessary to support ensuring that every student's IEP was met, we've never even come within any number close to what I would call the full funding of IDEA. And so ultimately, districts have had to take on those funding responsibilities. So I think we've got to continue to push for more IDEA funding in the long run. So as a district superintendent, the most important piece of supporting a student is making sure that we have a well-researched, highly effective IEP written with the parents, and that you put those supports in place and make sure that they're effective and you're documenting along the way, and that you're meeting with parents all the time on progress checks and making tweaks to that IEP to make sure that we're maximizing the students' opportunities. So, one of the most important pieces for me as a district superintendent was making sure that my staff was really well trained on how to work with parents on the ideal IEP for their students and how to activate that in place. One of the things that I think we've got to do, and I tried to do this as a district superintendent, is reduce the caseloads on our IEP leaders and our co-teachers so that they're working with a smaller set of students in a much more individualized way on their individualized IEP goals. And by bringing additional staff, that's what's going to allow you to reduce those numbers and reduce those caseloads.
Are there a couple of innovative solutions that schools can be exploring like this to ensure students are receiving the therapies they need?
There were situations where, I was in a small rural school district that only had 1,200 students. We were probably 45 minutes to an hour from any even medium-sized city. There were times where we really struggled to find speech language pathologists and OTs and PTs. And the thought that whether it's speech therapy or physical therapy or occupational therapy could be flexible in time and space and place, it would have just been game changing for the way that we could serve our students. And so, I think your solution is an innovative solution. And then I think there's a lot burgeoning in this space, and that we're going to have to tap into it. Parents want to be involved in their child's education. To think that speech services and PT services and OT services have to only happen during the school day is really an older way of thinking. And to be able to do your work in a telehealth way where the parent could be allowed to sit side by side with their student and think about the strategies that the specialist is working on and emulate those strategies, and could become a parent and educator partnership in helping the student to work through their learning needs would just be incredible.
What are the two pieces of advice you would give administrators who are looking to implement large scale change within their district?
The first piece of advice would be to make sure that there's a shared vision. If instead you sit down with your team and you have a collective vision for what you want to do with this, you're much more likely to see that initiative sustain regardless of who's actually in the top level leadership seat or the board or whatever. I would not take on any new initiative until you've taken the time to build support from it throughout your education community. In grad classes, I would always teach students, make sure you involve your stakeholders. Well, it's bigger than stakeholders. It's not just involving them. It's actually having them actively a part of the decision, and then they're part of owning that decision and helping to implement it throughout the district. As you're making any procurement or any innovation or systems level change, you also have to have a plan for how you want it implemented. And don't be afraid to do that incrementally. I'm going to bring this school on and bring them in as a beacon for this project. We call that pilots, right? And that from the pilot site, we bring on a couple more until eventually we have everybody. And then number two, make sure that it's aligned to the district, the superintendent, and the board's strategic vision for the school district. There are going to be so many innovations that come into school districts. There are going to be so many opportunities to try the new latest thing. And I would always tell my districts, I've got a simple definition of innovation. It's when we're doing something newer and better. And so if you can align it to your strategic plan and say, here are the goals that we have for our students. Here are the goals that we have for our staff. Here's the goals we have for our community and our families. And if that clearly aligns to those goals, then it builds back into that shared vision. But the better planning you do on the front end, the better product you're going to have when your students and your teachers start actually using that solution.
What is your mantra for inspiring the next generation of education leaders?
First and foremost, optimism. We're in a unique time in education where there's so much innovation happening in technology, and there's so much more ways to connect with our students and our families and our parents. I'm really optimistic about the future of education. The second for me is creativity. When I think about the conversations that I've had with workforce leaders, with government leaders, with philanthropists and nonprofit leaders, with providers and partners, what everybody wants in the next generation of future workers is people that are creative and can think of creative solutions. And I think it's what puts America in a position where we're leading the world economically because we've always been the most creative. We have to develop creativity in our students. And then the last piece I would say is collaboration. I think that the collaboration that we can develop in the classroom to be able to use these multiple tools to help students is going to be essential.
Why do you think schools should embrace more technology-based solutions?
We've got to teach kids how to be on the front edge of technology because we're entering a phase of life where they're always going to be confronting the newest thing that's coming. They're entering a world where they've got to be on top of the tools or they're going to fall behind in their competitiveness to get jobs. It's about making sure that they're ready to be critical thinkers.
Dr. Lane, why are you hopeful for education in America?
I'm hopeful because I visit classrooms all the time. We have the most passionate educators, the most passionate leaders in our schools, and we're at a critical inflection point for our education with all these technology tools and the crisis of COVID and everything that we've had to deal with. We have an opportunity to really look at everything we're doing and make decisions that can really plus up the work we're doing because everyone's looking for us to maximize the opportunity that our students have. And today's kids are going to make a difference because they're so passionate about it. And that's what's got me the most optimistic is I see who's getting ready to come into our classrooms and they are going to blow a lid off the place because they really want to reimagine what each classroom looks and feels like so that they can have the most effective experience for their students.
The Visionary Voices series convenes veteran education leaders and experts to explore promising new instructional approaches and ways to reimagine a future where every child can thrive. Follow along for thought-provoking conversations and discover actionable insights that will empower us to build new education systems, one that truly puts the whole child at the forefront.